Welcome back to HFO Multifamily Market Watch, your trusted source for information for apartment owners and investors. Multifamily Market Watch is presented by Pacific Exteriors Northwest, a contractor specializing in siding and exterior envelopes and delivering exceptional quality and service for over 30 years. And by Gantry Incorporated, the nation's largest independent mortgage banking firm.
Welcome back to Multifamily Market Watch. I'm Greg Frick, partner with HFO Investment Real Estate. Today we have with us Isaac Jones. He's a shareholder with Perkins & Company, a CPA firm that we've known for years. Thank you for taking the time to come speak with us.
Thanks for having me. We
were going to talk a little bit about opportunity zones, kind of people knew about them. It kind of came through. Maybe you can give a little background on the history of them, but it's, like I said, we talked off camera. There's Opportunity Zones 0.1 now. It's kind of this version 2.2, so we can kind of maybe highlight some of the changes. So thank you again for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And yeah, exactly. The Opportunity Zone 1.0 timing was kind of terrible, right? I mean, so it was part of the Tax Cut and Job Act, end of 2017.
Right.
And it was 6 pages in a bill, written very quickly. And then there were
kind of stuffed in there.
Yeah, stuffed in there, right? And then there were 2 rounds of proposed regulations. So that took like a year and a half maybe, which were 300-400 pages each, And so really nobody knew what the rules were going to be exactly. There was a whole bunch of lack of clarity. And so it was kind of challenging for people to jump in immediately.
Okay.
End of 2019, we get final regs. So the rules now are clear. What happens 3 months later? Right? Pandemic hits.
Right.
So, Opportunity Zone 1.0, there have been plenty of projects nationally, locally, but it really hasn't taken off, to the extent that it should have, given the compellingness of the tax benefits. And there also was this declining benefit. So there was an opportunity to have a step up in basis, basically ultimately never recognize gains that were invested if you invested by certain dates.
But yeah, there were certain date thresholds, and as we went further along in the calendar,
it was 2019.
Those benefits would go away.
Yep, 2019, 2021. So even though the really compelling benefit of these, and we'll get into this in more detail, is tax-free appreciation for a 10-year plus hold, losing some of those smaller benefits, I think just mentally for people as that clock kept going, right? That kind of turned people off of it a little bit.
Okay.
So
join the HFO community and get weekly multifamily intel. Click to subscribe.
So now, I guess to take a step back, right? The whole point of this whole program is to incentivize private investment into low-income communities, right? And so it happened a little bit, but not at the magnitude expected because of all those issues I just highlighted. So now we have the opportunity with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, OB3 as I call it, you have the opportunity where this becomes permanent, and they actually change some of the rules and now we know the rules from the first go around, right? So there's more clarity. So it really, people can hit the ground running and really take advantage of these opportunities.
So now one thing I think came up, I know when the first came, was this designation of the zones themselves.
Yeah.
Who does it? How did it come in place? And from what I had heard is some states did a lot better than others in terms of, putting it in places maybe in the path of development or where there's a higher likelihood of, even with the benefits of this thing going, give a little background on that for people that understand. Because again, doesn't cover the whole state.
It's clear as mud, right? The background there. But ultimately, the governor, so there were certain rubrics that you had to have certain census tracts, had to qualify. You had to have certain amount of poverty or certain median incomes and so forth, right? And then the governor actually goes through and, of course, had a task force, who advised and saw, okay, these are all the census tracts that can qualify, put forth a list. And that's where they were selected from. So some states, I'm sure different governors took different approaches.
Okay.
We had a bulk of downtown, the Central East Side, right? The Vancouver waterfront is all a zone. So there were some pretty compelling. There's some out in wine country. There's quite a few compelling zones, I'd say, in Oregon, and in Southwest Washington as well.
And so now on the new, is it going through? Do those zones change, or are they adding to those?
Yeah, so they do change. And so that's like, so the new OB3 rules is I'll just highlight a few of the changes. So the big one, it's now permanent. So instead of like the original bill was, hey, 12/31/2026, opportunity zones go away.
Right.
They no longer are a thing. Your investments would still continue and so forth, but there'd be no further investments. Now that's gone. This is a permanent provision in the Internal Revenue Code. When I say permanent, right, they could go in and write a new tax bill, of course, and change anything.
But there's no sunset the way it's written now.
Exactly. And so we have some certainty there. Also, there's every 10 years, they're going to reassign zones. So next July 1st, they start the process of reassigning zones, July 1st, 2026. That will then be in play 1/1/2027. They're going to do that every 10 years.
So every 10 years, there'll be a process to designate new zones within
within all the states, and the governor will put forth, based on the rubric that, qualifies census tracts. And so like I've done a little poking around, because I'm an OZ nerd, and the census tracts that currently exist, I think a lot of them will continue to exist. There may be some new ones, there may be a couple that fall out, but there's probably going to be a fair amount of overlap.
Based on the demographics and you said, some of the formulas that they have to meet to qualify for that.
Exactly.
So it's going to be permanent now. There's more certainty moving forward. Kind of walk us through kind of the mechanics of, an opportunity zone through like a qualified opportunity fund. Because there'll be a lot of clients that we would get calls and ask about, maybe not a specific project, but about a fund. Can I go into a fund?
How do I do this? I get the same calls. Yeah. So the logistics around it is like, number one, somebody has to recognize a capital gain. So that could be a stock sale, likely a business sale, investment real estate, rental real estate, right? Those types of things. You have a gain, and then you have 180 days, and you have to, within that 180 days, you have to invest into what's considered a qualified opportunity fund.
So very similar to a 1031 exchange from from the 180-day deal.
Yep, very much. No direct tracing of cash. You don't have to go park it with anybody, but timeline-wise, yes.
Okay, got it, okay.
And there is some flexibility in that 180 days. If you're getting it via K1, there's different options. You can use the end of the calendar year. You can use the original due date of the, K1, so 4/15. So you really have that 180 days can really stretch all the way to September of the following year if you have a K1 gain. So there's some gaming there and some flexibility there. But ultimately, you have a capital gain, and then you invest within 180 days. And the other kind of nuance there is it can't be the proceeds, it's the gain. So you go sell, you buy a building for $400,000, you sell it for $1 million, you have $600,000 to invest, not $1 million. So that's a big difference between 1031, right? Where there it's the proceeds, here it's the gain.
So you're sheltering the gain. The gain is what's going in, not the proceeds.
Exactly. So you can take some cash off the table, which is nice, but people have to be aware, because you can't go invest just any old money into an opportunity zone and get the benefits. I get that call all the time too, like, hey, I want to go do this deal. I don't have a gain, but I want to do it. Why can't I do it? And it's just a nuance in the rules. You have to have a capital gain in order to go in. So you go into a qualified opportunity fund, and those can be, like a syndicated deal, or it can be closely held. You can have husband and wife, who had a property and they go set up their own fund, right? So you have options there. The term fund turns some people off. Some of the best benefits.
People think fund, they think they're going into one of 1,000 people in some kind of fund somewhere. Yeah,
exactly. But some of the biggest bang for the buck I've seen is closely held, right? I mean, not to disparage the syndicated funds; those can be great too. But I mean, closely held can really be compelling, and people think fund and it's not available. But yeah, it's completely available. You go set up your own fund, and then typically these are a dual structure. So you have one entity QOF, and then you drop the funds down into another partnership directly below it, qualified opportunity zone, business, and then that actually buys the property and does the development or whatever it may be.
Gotcha. As long as it's within the area. And then what are the give us some kind of a rundown of the tax benefits for people that don't fully understand. Again, like I said, there's some stuff that's not sunsetting now, so it's changed from where it was before.
Yeah. So and I'll try not to muddy the water between the old and the new, but the same things are, is you have a capital gain, you invest, you defer that for a period of time. So you don't recognize that capital gain until a future date, and I'll differentiate between the two in a moment. And then the second thing is, so then at that future date, you have to recognize that gain. And but there are certain mechanisms where that gain that you're recognizing at that deferred date can be less than the original gain. And then the third and the really compelling thing is, if you hold for 10 plus years, then that appreciation is tax-free. And the thing that nobody talks about is the depreciation recapture also is tax-free. So you're taking losses along the way.
So you're getting tax-free on the depreciation recapture and on the appreciation moving forward.
And on the appreciation. Everybody talks about depreciation. That depreciation that you're taking along the way and not having to recapture that, that's like super compelling.
Yeah.
So and then the nuance there between the old and the new is, so the old was your deferrals till 12/31/2026. So
Right.
it's a fixed date, right?
Right.
And you had the opportunity to, have either 10 or 15% of that original gain never be recognized if you'd held for 5 or 7 years.
Right, you had the stair step, you could do the...
Exactly. So you'd have just recognition of 90 or 85% of that potentially. One nuance that I'll highlight in a minute. Then the new model, which is I think far better because it gets rid of that whole issue of like declining benefits if you miss those windows, is it's just a rolling 5 years. You invest on 6/30/2027. You've got a 5-year after that window, so that's deferred,
okay.
Until 2032, basically.
And then it's another 5-year chunk.
And then you recognize, so that's the other nuance. So you do recognize that original gain that 5 years later, right? So you invest $1 million, you recognize $1 million, or in the new rules, you get a 10% basis step up if you hold for the 5 years. So you ultimately recognize 90% of it. So you'd recognize $900,000 5 years later, and then you hold another 5+ years, and then any appreciation, any depreciation recapture, all that, you're basically exiting tax-free.
Got it. Okay.
And I guess the one other kind of real nuance there that people aren't talking about that's a huge benefit is the gain recognition at the inclusion date, so 12/31/2026. Hopefully this is not the case in 2.0, but in 1.0, economic times have kind of been uncertain, right? So the gain you recognize is the lower of the original gain deferred or the fair market value of that interest in the qualified opportunity fund. So I think there's some opportunity here for some of these projects that, are not currently sitting in a great spot, right? Because of, COVID and everything else. And so if you go get a, business valuation of that fund,
It may...
you may be able to recognize less, maybe none, right? And then you still hold it and it could still appreciate from today. So there's no limitation there. So there could be some real planning around the 26 date.
Wow, okay. So then what kind of real estate projects did you see that are, best suited for taking advantage of this opportunity?
Yeah, so it can be, all product type. It's typically ground up development. You can do like substantial rehab on projects.
Okay.
I mean, there are some options for like vacant properties that have been vacant for a period of time, brownfield projects. So there's some like carve outs in there, but primarily it's ground up development or like a very heavy rehab. If it's a rehab, basically you have to go in, split purchase price between land and building, and then you have to spend equal to the building plus $1. So like if you bought a property for $2 million, you say land's 500,000, building's 1.5, you have to put 1.5 plus $1 into that rehab. So it really is a heavy.
So it's a heavy
Yeah.
reuse or a heavy rehab.
Exactly. It's not just clean it up. So typically ground up development is where we see it more.
Gotcha. Okay. And then were you seeing in the, was it a majority of people doing these smaller type, you said like individual fund, or people going in the bigger syndication type funds?
It's both. I think it's both. Yeah. I mean, and there's not a whole lot of middle ground. There is some middle, but it's more like closely held or pretty big funds.
Okay.
And I think both are pretty compelling. And I guess one other comment on that question of what kind of projects, one other nuance in the 2.0 is rural is a whole thing. So there's a whole new concept of a rural fund, and that has separate set of rules where you get, instead of that 10% step up at 5 years, you get a 30% step up.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And also the rehab bar is lower. So instead of matching the building plus $1, you match 50% of the building plus $1. So there may be some opportunities for less
In
of a
the definition of rural, is it all based on the census block or census code? Or
it's going to be census tracts that qualify broadly that are designated as qualified census tracts, but then it's within areas that are less than 50,000 people. So like cities less than 50,000. So there's some out in like outside of Newburgh and stuff that are current zones, right? And so that's less than 50,000 people. So I think there might be some opportunities out there that could be interesting.
To try to incentivize maybe some development outside of the major metropolitan areas based on a census tract. Or interesting. Okay.
Exactly.
What are the pitfalls for an investor or developers? Somebody say developers. I think for them it was a great opportunity for them from a funding standpoint. It had an option of easier to raise some capital. But what are some of the pitfalls that you're telling your clients when they come to you and say, you know what, Isaac, we're going to have this gain. We're thinking about this. What do you kind of walk them through to see if it fits their box?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like, top of the list, has to be a good investment, right? You know, you don't let the tax, tail wag the dog, right? So make sure it's a good investment. And then second, it's like, okay, 180 days. There's a lot of cures within the opportunity zone space, like things that if you screw it up a little bit, you could fix it. The 180 days is not one. You miss your investment window, you're out.
So that's
that's a hard rule. And then another one is just investing gain versus proceeds, like we talked about earlier. I mean, a lot of people miss that. And if you invest funds that you don't have gains for, it's what's classified as a mixed fund, and you only qualify for all the tax benefits on the portion that's related to the gain. So like if you go ahead and invest $1 million, you only have $500,000 of gains, only half of your investment is really in a qualified opportunity fund kind of structure where you're getting these benefits.
But now they could still put the full $1 million in. They just aren't going to get the benefit of that. If, like you said, half's gain,
half is just like a standard real estate investment.
I got it. Okay. Yeah. So they're not restricted from going in there. It's just they don't get the tax benefit of it.
Yeah. Exactly. And then I guess two other things. I mean, there is some, complication here. So it's, you're not setting up your own fund with $100,000 a gain, right? I mean, you need like a certain size project to warrant, like the professional fees and everything like that. You're not doing a duplex, right? It has to be like a sizable project of some significance. It doesn't have to be a huge tower, but there is just a bar. And then just making sure you're working with professionals that understand this. I mean, it's a complex area that not everybody dug into, especially with it supposed to expire by 26.
Right.
I think
it kind of came and everybody was excited, but then as we got further in the calendar, is there? Hey, wait, the benefit's not there. It was, kind of lost a little bit of its luster there.
Yeah, 100%. I was, coming up. I've been coming up 16 years at Perkins and Company, so I'm still consider myself kind of a younger, partner there. And so I saw this and saw, this runway. I was like, okay, a lot of the older people aren't going to necessarily pursue this. This is my opportunity to really differentiate. So I went, head in, and I think there are, a handful of people who did that, but a lot of people kind of just didn't look at this. So you have to make sure you're working with somebody who understands it.
And are you seeing? I mean, for people, is it typically, existing, like our clientele, a lot of existing real estate owners that are looking for an option out? Is it more, I'm selling a business and I've got that capital gains there, I've got stock options? I mean, what's the typical profile of somebody? I mean, there's never a typical, but what do you predominantly see people going into these?
I think it's both. I think real estate people like to invest in real estate. So we've certainly seen a lot of people selling buildings and going into new deals. I think that's probably number one, but also selling a business and, people who are executives at, publicly traded companies, right, have a real concentration of stock, want to diversify, want to get a little real estate exposure, right? You see that. So it's all over the map. I mean, it's anybody who's recognizing capital gains, but I do think, our real estate investors definitely like
And now
this.
with the changing and, like you said, the 2.0, there's more certainty. I think that may open it up to having people at least look at it now, because again, I think there was a cloud of uncertainty, but there was just a lot of questions. And as when you have these things that have these sunset dates, I think a lot of times from a conservative standpoint, people just kind of shy away from. They never want to be the first one in.
Yep, 100%. I mean, that was definitely off the line. There was like a couple people went and did things right, early days, 2018, 2019, but it was like the forms weren't even finalized. I mean, it was really unclear. And I think this is really now this being a permanent fixture in the code. Us already knowing all the rules from the first go around. I mean, there are still some gray areas, but it's I think going to be a lot more viable this time. Also, the economic environment in the world, is changing too.
And then do you guys help vet out some if it's going to like a larger fund? Is that something where you can say, hey, we've had experience with this group, or how do you how does somebody do research on something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't do due diligence on like investments. So that I think, it's, I think people have to either rely on their, advisors besides us, as far as due diligence on whether that investment makes sense. Like obviously we can help, review operating agreements and like make sure our clients understand.
Make sure the time frames are working and all that stuff.
Yeah. And like, advise them in that and advise them around their own personal, kind of planning. And does this fit within, your long-term planning, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah.
And can you give like an example of a story of maybe a client that went through, exiting out and going into an opportunity zone and kind of what happened?
Yeah. No, I have one that's kind of further along than some of them that I think is, highlights kind of all the compelling benefits, right? Is closely held family, sells a property, has another property lined up. They actually had the land. So like, depending on how you do them, there's like a whole bunch of details in like measuring what qualifies and stuff. But like if you have land that's not super valuable, and you could actually like have already owned that. There's an original use. Typically you have to buy stuff, but they actually had the land, and like based on the numbers, it was okay to just contribute the land and build on that land, and they still qualified and everything. So they had this project all queued up, roll it into this new deal. They completed, did a cost seg, got a ton of deductions, and then they refied, were able to take some cash out. Now they're going to go recognize in 26, but they've already gotten deductions that are probably rolling forward to help offset that. Wow. Plus they have cash if they have any tax liability, right? Now they're going to hold it long term, and they're going to, tax-free exit one day.
Oh, wow. Okay. So they could, because I know on existing 1031s, it's tough if you already own the land. So they were able to make this thing work by doing something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. If you own the land, there's more planning involved. You have to really look at the numbers. You can do kind of a land lease, self-rental kind of deal there, or you can contribute if the numbers work. But it certainly is a little more complicated.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to share this. Like I said, when it first came out, people got very excited. Not so much in our world, a little bit on the development side, but I think now as it's permanent, I think it's going to be another lever in somebody's estate plan as to what to look at as maybe some options of, do you exit out this way or so. Again, thanks for taking the time to share with our audience, and we'll see you again next time on Multifamily Market Watch.
Thanks for having me,
man.
Our entire office specializes in multifamily real estate, making HFO the largest multifamily brokerage in the Pacific Northwest. Your success is our passion. Build your legacy with HFO. Call 503-241-5541 or visit our website at hfore.com for more information. HFO is a member of Global Real Estate Advisors. Learn more at grea.com.
Love the insights? Tap the like button and click subscribe. It helps us bring more multifamily news straight to you.